There are hundreds of trials going on for antivirals and, as you know, convalescent plasmas and antibody therapies and so many. What's your level of optimism right now that we will find a sort of game changer treatment at some point soon?
Well, I don't think we're going to have a game-changer treatment in time for the fall, but I think we're going to have treatments that may be effective against this virus and may have a treatment effect and help mitigate severe outcomes for a certain cohort of patients. The therapeutic antibodies look very promising. There's 4 companies working on these. These are basically copies of the kinds of antibodies your body would produce in response to the infection. Remdesivir looks like it may be active against the virus. It's not a home run drug, but perhaps used early in the course of infection, it can mitigate severe outcomes in a certain percentage of patients. So there's treatments that could be available, I believe, in time for the fall to help deal with perhaps a second wave of this infection as we head into the fall and the winter. That could have a treatment effect and benefit a certain percentage of patients. But there's no cure, there's no game changer on the horizon. There's about 70 drugs that are currently under active protocols with FDA in clinical development, and then about another 200 in earlier stages of development. So there's a pretty rich pipeline. I think we will get therapeutics on the market, but nothing in sort of the near term that's going to affect this epidemic, and only a handful of drugs that may be available by the time we deal with perhaps a second wave.
Dr. Gottlieb, should treatments and will treatments influence reopening of the economy, or only a vaccine should do that?
No, I think we're going to have a better toolbox in the fall. So as we reopen the economy in May and June, we're not going to have a treatment. We're certainly not going to have a vaccine. What we're relying on is the ability to do effective track and trace and better screening to mitigate small outbreaks and prevent them from becoming large outbreaks. And that's what we're going to be dependent upon in May and June and July and August. But my bigger concern is that we get through this reopening, but we don't really squelch the epidemic. We continue to have smoldering infection in this country. The summer is a backstop of sorts against a really large outbreak. You're going to see less transfer in the hot summer months when people are outside more, when droplet transmission becomes less efficient. But then as we come back to work in the fall and schools back in session and residential college campuses are back in session, all that smoldering infection suddenly ignites. And at that point, you want to have treatments available and better tools, better screening in place that can help mitigate large outbreaks so we don't deal with another epidemic. We're going to face a lot of risk as we head into the fall and the winter, and this coronavirus collides with flu season. This is not going away. We're going to have to learn to live with this and deal with it and reduce its risk.
Well, Georgia is obviously going to be one of the first experiments starting to reopen today. Can China tell us anything, Dr. Gottlieb, about what's going to happen in Georgia and other states here that are going to reopen? I know we might not trust all of the data necessarily coming out, but according to a lot of the multinational companies, they're operating. They're open and they're almost getting back to normal.
Well, look, China's having some outbreaks right now in parts of the country. Singapore's having a second wave that's substantially larger than its first wave. There's infection spreading in Hong Kong. Japan seems to have had smoldering infection all along that's now starting to ignite into larger fires in that country as well. So it's hard to get rid of this virus. This is a very contagious virus, and we have no cross-immunity to it, so the population is very susceptible. And even after we get through this epidemic, probably only 5% of the U.S. population will have been exposed to this virus and develop some level of immunity. So we're going to continue to be at risk. I think what China shows us and what Singapore and other countries can teach us is that this is a long-term fight, and we're going to need to put measures in place that we can live with, that are sustainable. We're going to need to create some level of social distancing on an ongoing basis, and we're probably going to popularize the use of masks. We're probably going to try to move things that are held indoors, outdoors, where we can, where we know spread is less efficient. So there's things that we're going to have to do and in ways we're going to have to adapt that's just going to reduce the risk overall on a daily basis until we can get to a vaccine.
And Dr. Gottlieb, whatever the rationale for why Georgia is reopening and exactly what parts of the economy they are going to reopen and the criticism that may have come with that, what can we learn from Georgia over the weeks ahead? Are they, in effect, going to be a little bit of a test case for the rest of the country, whether that was the right call for them or not?
Well, I think what we can learn from Georgia is what not to do. I mean, what they opened up were the businesses that you would open up last, not the businesses you would open up first. And even from an economic rationale, I understand there's small business people behind those businesses that they reopened. But in terms of having an impact on their economy, It represents a very small percentage of their economy, the kinds of businesses that they're reopening. And they're also not businesses necessarily that improve quality of life. So initially, you want to start reopening things that give people a sense of normalcy. But those are things like religious services that you can hold outside, perhaps gym classes that you can hold outside, reopening parks, things that give people a sense of normalcy about their lives. Nail salons, bowling alleys, tattoo parlors probably aren't going to reach significant enough for the population to give an overall sense of things returning to some level of normalcy. So I'm not sure what the rationale was for the kinds of businesses they reopened. I think they should have been looking to reopen businesses that were more essential to the Georgia economy, maybe employed more people. But they shouldn't have been opening right now at all. Georgia still is in very much the throes of an epidemic. And if you look at the modeling that came out yesterday, the update to the IHME model, which is the one that's closely watched, it showed a couple of states worsening. And Georgia was the state that worsened the most in that model. The model now shows their epidemic not peaking until the end of this month or into early May. So they're very much in the throes of this.